I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today I'm reading my post, The Psychology of Shemitism, looking at manipulation techniques. A late comment that was posted on the Brigands and Shemitism provides a good opportunity to analyze both psychological manipulation and historical distortion. Since few were still reading past 300 comments in the thread, I wanted to highlight it here. As Neferhotep said, we are a family of truth seekers. None of us have arrived. Yet those who claim to know the truth and use psychological techniques to intimidate those who question are important to identify and name their methods. I have zero interest in convincing this particular commenter of anything, but I have much interest in unraveling the web of deception and manipulation. The masterminds have hijacked religion, trade, money, war, literature, art, and logic. Their hallmark is doing nothing directly but mastering the minds of those who serve them unwittingly. Should we excuse the servants, whether Zion Nazis, since the two have always been one, or the naive do-gooders, NDGs, who would enable their cover of being victims? Without the latter, the former would soon be stopped. The belief that people are evil sets us up to think it's inevitable, human nature, not a man-made, spelling and context, psyop by a handful of sociopaths who've kidnapped God and made us bow to their idol. I believe we should stop clarifying to those who identify as Jews, Christians, or Muslims that we don't mean them, only the rulers hiding behind their ideologies. If you are an apologist for a sociopathic God, you empower those who speak for him. The foundational Abrahamic myths frame our thinking, even of atheists. They need to be examined and challenged. The immorality of Scripture, the inversion of history, and the gaslighting of experience can't be politely overlooked. Good people do bad things because false stories of evil people are perpetuated by good people. Behaviors are good or bad, people are not. Propaganda that mixes truth and lies is the most powerful weapon of evil because it causes good people to do bad things. So let's look at this post. A commenter called Seho wrote April 27th, I remember a time when I read sensible things in this blog. The style has changed as well, with some bits looking like an incoherent ramble. Among the bizarre assertions, the 1933 article posted by International Jews entitled Judea Declares War on Germany stated that only 600,000 Jews lived in Germany before the war. So 6 million killed is impossible by a factor of 1,000%. It sounds like Teresa believes that the claim is that Germans only killed German Jews. That's extremely odd from someone who is very well read, and yet there is no other way to read that sentence otherwise. In fact, the Nazis invaded many countries where Jews lived, hence the trains. You will still find elderly Jews who can tell you that they or their parents were taken from France, Poland, Greece, and elsewhere to the camps. Oh, and by the way, the founder of the Palestinian National Movement, Amin al-Husseini, asked Hitler to extend the final solution to the Middle East. But Hitler had his hands full and politely declined. Another weird comment is this. What Dean Henderson states is that the protocols are not actually even Jewish. Well, of course the protocols were not Jewish. That's the whole point. Nobody aside from a few neo-Nazi weirdos, and sadly many Arabs, believe the protocols were written by Jewish people. It was forged, by the police of the Tsar to deflect popular anger at him to the Jews. I replied April 28th. Tell me, Saho, was the information about 26 million Germans exiled with maximum brutality, sold into slavery, or killed, some in concentration camps, new information to you? Are you in the habit of citing that as one of the greatest atrocities of all time, a horror that we should always remember so that it will never be repeated? Were you shocked and sickened by this, not just by the magnitude of the number, but of the 26 million individual stories of pain and suffering that have never been told, as if these lives had no value and were just bodies to be raped and used? I didn't think so. You had no idea about this, and you could care less. Oh no, let's get back to your people. Only your people matter. We need to relive each detail of what was done to your people. There are plenty of posts on this comment thread that will show the lie to the 6 million. You don't even need to leave the page. But you just glossed right over, skipped, rolled your eyes, and moved past what was done to 26 million of my people. You fucking couldn't care less. Instead, you just want to go post some vague insults about me from your place of superiority. Typical for your people. Saho replied April 29th. Teresa, I didn't expect you would answer my question about the odd arithmetics in your article, but I also definitely didn't expect such a violent and delusional answer. How do my words imply what you wrote? Something definitely happened to you since the happy days when I was delighted at having found your blog, being a lone COVID dissident. It's also telling that you are not posting this publicly. It would alienate at least some of your audience, or am I overestimating their civility like I did about yours? I will respect your choice to communicate privately, though. I do hope you'll take a deep breath, look outside the window, and listen to the birds singing before you reply. You couldn't be further from the truth. I am a middle-aged Jewish man whose love of his life is a wonderful, deeply spiritual German woman. In our quarter century together, at least 3 members of her family, plus herself, told me about the ordeals Germans have gone through at the end of the war or after. My partner told me how terrible the hunger was for her mother as a child. There was no way in hell I would have downplayed this or other stories, even in my private thinking. On the other hand, I only hesitantly ever mentioned the relatives of my grandparents, children included, who were killed by the Germans, as I know it is tough for her. My girlfriend's family never told me about what is in your post, though, and they're all staunch provincial conservatives who detest political correctness. I am assuming that your numbers are exaggerated. Arithmetics are not your strength, it seems. But I do vaguely remember reading that Germans were massively taken as slave laborers after the war. I really should find reliable information about this. It is horrific and chilling. You are right about one thing, though. I am ethnocentric. So are you and every human being on Earth, even the wokest ethnic masochist, parading their fake compassion for Palestinians. We wouldn't exist if we weren't. It's grotesque to project that onto Jews. There are countless other people on Earth who are far, far more ethnocentric. Take any tribe in the Amazon, or the Thai, or the Arabs, and start a blog about their ethnocentricity. It doesn't pay off, though, I warn you. You might as well stick to the Jews. They're a more juicy topic. Strangely, your text about the millions of Germans that were killed does not characterize that as a genocide, but you use the term genocide at several occasions for either ancient Hebrews or the Israelis. Again, this could be caused by your learning difficulties with arithmetics as a little Catholic girl. But the 36,000 Palestinians killed, according to Hamas, appear like less of a genocide than the millions of Germans you should be more worried about, being ethnocentric like everybody else. Okay, not as badly ethnocentric as the Jews, because they're really so sick. As far as you might believe to be from the woke crowd, you are an ethic masochist just like them. Well, not quite, but still. The Palestinian narrative has sucked little chunks of your Teutonic soul one by one without you noticing it. Yes, it is that strong. Never mind the Palestinians themselves, a heterogeneous assemblage of various ethnic groups, whose entire bone marrow was surgically removed by that vampiric narrative that forced them into Monty Python-esque absurd resistance towards their long-forgotten Hebrew brethren. If the Hebrew army had been half as cruel as the Syrian or Yemenite army, there would not be one Arab left, from the river to the sea. Remember, deep breath, bird song, etc. The numbers don't add up. Saho accepts at face value that 6 million Eastern European Jews were killed by Hitler in the gas chambers of Nazi concentration camps. I would guess that most readers that I have seen the newspaper clippings preceding World War II talking about 6 million Jews endangered in Russia, so we know that number was already a Zionist talking point. I've written about the Bolshevik Jews in Russia in Fiddler on the Truth. Thanks to Frances Leader, she just posted a link to 236 references to 6 million Jews prior to the Nuremberg trials. Jeff also posted a link to Rentz and Ilya Ehrenberg, the man who invented the 6 million. Ehrenberg was the propagandist to the Soviets during World War II, who wrote, "Kill! Kill! In the German race there is nothing but evil, not one among the living, not one among the yet unborn, but is evil. Follow the precepts of Comrade Stalin. Stamp out the fascist beast once and for all in its lair. Use force and break the racial pride of these German women. Take them as your lawful booty. Kill. As you storm onward, kill, you gallant soldiers of the Red Army." On December 22, 1944, Ehrenberg became the first person to mention the Kabbalistic 6 million alleged Jewish victims and introduced that into Soviet propaganda. He co-produced the fictitious Black Book that laid the foundation for the Holocaust narrative. His propaganda would explain why rape of German women and girls by Soviet soldiers was relentless and inescapable after the war, as films like Hellstorm have documented. It wasn't a rogue exception that women should be forced, broken, and taken as booty, but the official narrative written by the same author as the 6 million. This single Jew created a culture of dehumanization and a story of inherent evil that justified every act of violence committed against German women, any one of whom could have been the mother or aunts of Saho's girlfriend. Is that something he claims as part of his proud ethnic heritage? Had this statement been published by Goebbels and instigated systemic rape of Jewish women, Germans would need to denounce it today or be held complicit in anti-Semitic hatred. Have Saho and other Jews denounced Ehrenberg and held his other statements about the 6 million and the Holocaust in contempt as the product of a sociopath who promoted rape and murder to prevent evil spawn. Why not? Trains and arithmetic. Neferhotep has posted a stellar article on Adolf Eichmann and the Holocaust. Regarding Eichmann, Neff cites the Jewish Telegraphic Agency in 1961, which was established in 1917, that, quote, Adolf Eichmann was disclosed today to have told his Israel interrogators that he had many Jewish relatives, that he was neither a Jew hater nor an anti-Semite, and that all my men knew it. Eichmann made those statements early in his tape recordings in the prison cell to which he was brought last May. This section of the former Gestapo colonel's testimony was not played in court, as was his admission of complicity in the murders of 6 million European Jews. The court was adjourned today for the observance of Israel's 13th anniversary of independence. Eichmann claimed that he and another SS official named Hagen were sent to Palestine by Reinhard Heydrich, Himmler's deputy. He claimed throughout his statement that he had pro-Zionist sympathies, declaring that on his visit to Palestine, my sympathies at that time were with the Jews, not the Arabs. He said that he used only Jewish cabs because the Arab cab drivers were unreliable and fast. The documentation, however, recorded the fact that Eichmann was shown a report by Hagen on the Palestine visit, which had been corrected in Eichmann's handwriting. In that report were scores of viciously anti-Semitic comments, such as that the economic chaos in Palestine is explained by the fact that Jews here cheat each other, since, because of the shortage of Aryans, they cannot cheat them. And that German Jews had said that it was better to return to German concentration camps than to stay in Palestine. At an early stage in the interrogation, Eichmann said that he read his first book on a Jewish subject when he joined the Jewish Bureau of the Security Police in 1935, and that the book was Dr. Herzl's The Jewish State. He also read a description of Jabotinsky's Zionist revisionist organization. He said he prepared a summary of the two items and of Agudas Israel activities for an information brochure which was distributed among members of the Gestapo. Neferhotep also quotes David Irving on Eichmann and the trains. Eichmann was never the top Nazi architect of the Holocaust he was later made out to be. He was a relatively unimportant person, the head of Office A4B in Department 4, the Gestapo of the Reich Security Head Office. His office supervised the transportation to concentration camps of the Jews. Eichmann was the specialist in transporting Jews in Hungary and Slovakia to Germany. Adolf Eichmann survived unharmed in Argentina, a few miles north of Buenos Aires, under the name Ricardo Clement. Of course, Adolf Eichmann had not gone unnoticed, but they simply let him be. Eichmann bought a copy of the German edition of the memoirs of Rudolf Höss, commandant in Auschwitz. Höss had written these memoirs while he was in Polish captivity in Krakow. A Flemish journalist hiding in Argentina got hold of some of the personal notes of Eichmann and taped conversations with Eichmann and wrote transcripts down that he sold to Life magazine in 1959 or 60 that published them. Throughout his personal notes, Adolf Eichmann wrote that Endlösung, the final solution, to him only meant to transport the Jews out of Germany, not to murder them. Eichmann wrote about his ideas that possibly the Zionists used the Nazis to further their own goals. He describes the pits in Auschwitz, the crematoria, just like Albert Hoffman, but nothing on the gas chambers. Eichmann wrote notes about disagreeing with Höss, in particular, about the claims that 2.5 million Jews were liquidated at Auschwitz, where he was commandant. Eichmann commented, "Where does Höss believe that he got these 2.5 million Jews? Not for me, because to have liquidated 2.5 million decrepit, elderly, unworkable Jews, I must have had to feed him 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 million Jews in that space of time. And from the transport point of view alone, this would have been totally impossible. If you're going to ship 5 or 6 million Jews across Europe to Auschwitz at that time, let me tell you how many trains that would have taken. You're not only going to have trains going that way full of Jews, you're going to have empty trains coming back. And you're going to have a circulation time, a time when they're unloading at one end, a time when they're loading at the other end. You're going to need so many thousands of wagons. This alone proves that Rudolf Haas was talking through his hat. These figures are totally fantastic. What the hell is Haas up to? The math of census numbers. From both sides of the equation, the 6 million number doesn't add up. Here's one pointer from the book, The 6 Million Fact or Fiction by Peter Winter. Official German records show that there were 4.5 million Jews under Nazi control. And of that number, 4.3 million lodged claims as Holocaust victims after the war. On the other side of the census, Julia Schoolafish cites Carolyn Yeager on Jewish population figures don't add up. She writes, the late great Gerd Honsig's book, Acquittal for Hitler, is organized as the testimony of 36 reputable witnesses for Adolf Hitler's innocence in the matter of mass murder in gas chambers, among other criminal accusations. The book was published in 1988 to much excitement and disturbance. The following is part of the testimony of witness number 31, Austrian author Herbert Schweiger, which I found particularly interesting since it discusses the money angle in relation to the magical 6 million. Witness number 31. Who killed the Jews who disappeared from Jewish statistics between 1946 and 1952? The propaganda. The Almanac of the American Jewish Committee, which appears new every year, announced in the 1945 edition on page 367 the number of world Jewry as 15 million. For 1946, this number increased by 500,000 to 15.7 million. Then this number of about 15.7 million Jews is maintained by the Almanac for the years 1947, 1948, and 1949. In 1950, the number suddenly drops to 11.5 million. Why? Who eliminated about 4 million Jews between 1945 and 1947? Who in the world did this after the war? The answer is clear: the propaganda. Only a few years after the Nuremberg trial and after the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, the gassing legend was propagandistically extended. The Zionist Nahum Goldman, president of the World Jewish Congress in 1949 and president of the Zionist World Organization in 1956, negotiated with Federal Chancellor Adenauer over the financial tribute to Israel, that is, to a state that did not exist during the war. From 1950 on, Goldman applied psychological pressure to squeeze as much payment out of Bonn as possible. He understood his business. The 6 million gas Jews were the means to pocket billions of marks, which helped build the State of Israel. Anyone who opposes this 6 million gassing propaganda is enemy number one for Tel Aviv, for the international press and Wall Street, because he could question the billions to be paid from the Bonn, now Berlin, financial system in future. The historical uniqueness of this process consists in the fact that politicians and journalists of the German people are the most consistent representatives and propagators of this lie. The Jews themselves state their current population at around 15 million. But how could such a miraculous multiplication take place? If the final solution with the annihilation of 6 million Jews had been decided and carried out, then in 1945 only 9.3 million Jews could have been alive in the world. However, the Wannsee Protocol submitted at the Nuremberg trial bears no date or signature and can therefore not be considered a historically evidential document. And even so, in this document, there is no talk of a killing of the Jews, but only of their evacuation to the east. According to these sources, the Jews would have had to have increased about 70% today, but that is impossible. In this connection, the reference to the small number of children of Jewish parents acquires special noteworthy importance, as evidenced by the constant number of the Jewish world population in the second and third decades of this century, the 20th. For the post-war years of the fifth and sixth decade, is this prevailing worldwide Jewish procreation behavior no longer valid? My daughter was listening to a podcast on the unreliability of census data around the world wars because the census takers had also been killed. So I think this discrepancy in the census data has been getting out, and they needed a narrative to cover that up. The Zion Nazis. Julius has also published a book review chat on the myth of German villainy by Benton Bradbury. For my Fiddler on the Truth episode, I had listened to Chapter 4 in audio called The Red Terror, and it has haunted me ever since. Julius lists the contents, including Chapter 12, the Nazis and the Zionists actually worked together for Jewish emigration out of Germany. So I've ordered that book, and I will report more later. Neferhotep also gives evidence for the Zionist leadership of the Nazi Party and Zionazi persecution of the Jews to force them to emigrate to Palestine. Robert Zepper has an excellent video that I have linked in the Substack on the hidden history of Zionism, republished by my friend Mark Elsis at Earth Newspapers. Well worth watching. Now let's go back to the psychology of superiority. The psychological trick of hierarchical religion is to grant you superiority over others in exchange for you recognizing their superiority over you. Let's look at the trickle-down effects of this in Saho's comments and the not-so-subtle manipulations in them. He writes, I remember a time when I read sensible things in this blog. The style has changed as well, with some bits looking like an incoherent ramble. In other words, you are such a disappointment. I used to approve of you for my position of superiority. He writes, among the bizarre assertions, and another weird comment, followed by statements presented as simple facts, without bothering to post a source because, well, everyone intelligent knows. He makes no reference whatsoever to the 26 million Germans exiled, enslaved, or killed after the war. Simply skips over this as unimportant, whether false or true, not even worth debating. He writes, Teresa, I didn't expect you would answer my question about the odd arithmetics in your article, but I also definitely didn't expect such a violent and delusional answer. How do my words imply what you wrote? Something definitely happened to you since the happy days when I was delighted at having found your blog, being a lone COVID dissident. Once again, I'm so disappointed in you. What was done to 26 million Germans wasn't violence, but your words are. And delusional, a psychological condition I'm diagnosing just to help you out, poor dear. What traumatic thing happened to make you so bitter? Poor thing. He writes, it's also telling that you're not posting this publicly. It would alienate at least some of your audience, Or am I overestimating their civility like I did about yours? I will respect your choice to communicate privately, though. In other words, your audience are nice people who agree with me and would probably be appalled to see you acting this way, unless they're as uncivilized as you. And you know this, which is why you sent this privately. There. I'll keep your secret at how unhinged you are and won't embarrass you publicly. Now, of course, my reply and his was posted publicly because why would I waste time sending something privately to him? He writes, I do hope you'll take a deep breath, look outside the window, and listen to the birds singing before you reply. Clearly, I am an emotionally unstable, joyless, angry person who's taking offense when all he's trying to do is help. He insists he does care about German suffering because his girlfriend is German and her mother experienced hunger as a child. However, he only hesitantly ever mentioned to her the relatives of his grandparents, including children killed by Germans, because it's tough for her. Germans are pathological killers who murder children, which is tough to live with. But her mother went hungry as a child, which has no perpetrator unless it's the Germans themselves. He writes, I am assuming that your numbers are exaggerated. Arithmetics are not your strength, it seems, but I do vaguely remember reading that Germans were massively taken as slave laborers after the war. I really should find reliable information about this. It is horrific and chilling. While not knowing anything about it, he assumes my sources linked in my article are exaggerated. And last, you are right about one thing, though. I am ethnocentric. So are you and every human being on Earth, even the wokest ethnic masochists parading their fake compassion for Palestinians. We wouldn't exist if we weren't. It's grotesque to project that onto Jews. There are countless other people on Earth who are far, far more ethnocentric. He then gives examples of tribes in the Amazon, the Thai, and the Arabs, but says that it wouldn't pay off to write about them because Jews are a more juicy topic. The implication is that everyone loves to hate the Jews for no reason, and our fake compassion for Palestinians is merely a means of hating Jews. This is a very key point. The rest are insults that don't need explanation, but in a separate comment, Saho wrote, your whole point is that others are morally inferior, and you blindly assume it must be the case of a complete stranger because of his ancestry. You and I are exactly the same, fallible human beings who use ethics and facts to harden their egos and narratives. So, as readers know, my dogma is that all people are morally equal, but behaviors are not. Saho projects superiority and ego onto me and says I twist ethics and facts to harden my narrative. My narrative is the innocent and ethics of Germans and Palestinians against actions that are sociopathic against them, not merely ethnocentric. To favor your own people is ethnocentrism, but at the expense of others is sociopathic, especially the country that hosts you. Behind every atrocity is a propagandist. Saho states that Palestinians are a heterogeneous assemblage of various ethnic groups whose entire bone marrow was surgically removed by that vampiric narrative that forced them into Monty Python-esque absurd resistance towards their long-forgotten Hebrew brethren. He's not wrong about that. The heterogeneous assemblage of Canaan was cursed to be a slave since the story of Noah was written by Saho's Hebrew brethren. That vampiric narrative has been trying to suck out their bone marrow for 2 millennia. But he is wrong that their resistance is absurd. Israel is already lost. Saho and the chosen people were just chosen to be their dupe and take the fall. And for more on this, here is Fiddler on the Truth, and this is the beginning of the end for Israel. Thank you for watching.